What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a film I have been very much looking forward to watching after reading a lot of reviews on it. And this film was released last year, and most of the reviews I've read for this film are overwhelmingly positive. I did not know a whole lot about this movie going into it, other than the casting. There were some actors and actresses in this that I really enjoy. And I love movies like that when I can go into something knowing there's people cast in it that I'm going to enjoy their performances, but knowing a little about the film, it makes it more exciting and an enjoyable experience. And I'm looking forward to telling you about this movie today. And the film I'm going to be talking about is Passages. Passages is directed by Ira Sachs. In contemporary Paris, German filmmaker Thomas embraces his sexuality through a torrid love affair with a young woman named Agathe, an impulse that blurs the lines that define his relationship with his husband, Martin. When Martin begins an extramarital affair of his own, he successfully gains back his husband's attention while simultaneously unearthing Tomas's jealousy. Grappling with contradicting emotions, Tomas must either embrace the confines of his marriage or come to terms with the relationship having run its course. So, as I said, knew very little about this movie before going in to watch it. I was very excited to see it after reading some of the initial reviews, and this movie was awesome. I absolutely loved it. It reminded me of something from a completely different era, just in terms of its simplicity. But despite the fact that the film is incredibly simplistic in its plot design, it's very complex in its character structure, and that's something I really appreciated. If I wanted to sum this film up in like a couple of words or less, it's gay chaos. This movie is one of the most chaotic and anxiety inducing movies that I've watched in a while. It's literally the worst person you can imagine on the planet, making self-destructive decision after self-destructive decision and not having any sort of comprehension whatsoever as to how it's going to impact other people's lives, and just watching this person get so in over their head to the point where you're just like, can this get any worse? And every single time it does. And I really enjoyed it a lot, and I'm excited to talk about it in detail with you today. Beginning of the film, we're introduced to Tomas, played by Franz Rogowski, who is a film director, and we see from the first 5 minutes he is an asshole. He treats his actors horribly. He is just not a very good person. And I love the way that the director uses the opening sequence of him directing on a film set to give you everything that you need to know about Tomas as a person. It's fantastic. It's structured really well. And he gets done with his shoot. He goes out to this party, and we find out, I can't remember if he calls him on the phone or if he shows up at the party briefly, that he is married to this man, Martin, played by Whishaw, who a lot of you out there may know as the voice of Paddington, which is really insane to think about as you are watching this movie. And the two of them, they live at this place together, and his husband is really tired and doesn't want to stay out for very long. And Tomas is like, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I just finished filming this thing. I want to be out and have a good time. And his husband's like, okay, well, you do whatever you want. After being out for a while, he is introduced to Agathe, played by Adèle Exarchopoulos, who a lot of people know from Blue is the Warmest Color. And the two of them hit it off, and they end up going to another house together, and the two of them end up having sex. And slowly after that, Tomas goes back home to his husband and tells his husband that he's hooked up with this woman and that he's experiencing all these new feelings, and that he feels like he needs to try to examine them more and try to understand himself. And so early on in the film, you're wondering, okay, is this a true want to try to figure out yourself and that self-discovery? And after that, he goes back and forth between these two people. He manipulates them. He uses them for his own personal gain. And the entire movie is us watching Tomas create this immense amount of chaos. So as I said, I loved this movie. And what I love so much about this movie is the simplicity of it, but the fact that despite the plot being incredibly simplistic, there's a lot of complexities in the character writing. For instance, Tomas, as I said from the very beginning, Tomas Tomas's character is really fascinating. Obviously, the actor that portrays him does a phenomenal job. It takes a really great performer to play a character that is so incredibly unlikable from the very first frame, and he does a brilliant job. But what I love so much about the character is obviously this is a film where queer people are at the central focal point. And there have been a lot of different stories told about queer people over the past several years. And what I think is interesting about this movie is you get a lot of difficulties with that queer people experience presented at the forefront. For instance, he is married to a man and he starts to get sexual feelings towards a woman. And at the beginning of the movie, you kind of see like this complex feeling in himself and trying to understand his identity. And I think it's really important to express that it doesn't matter what age you are, there are people that are still working through their identity and trying to find themselves. I think there are people that spend their entire lives trying to figure out who they are 100%, and that's perfectly and totally okay. And I think it's interesting the director showcases that really early on, but very quickly shows that human beings are human beings, and there are some people that are just downright awful no matter what their circumstances are. And we slowly start to wonder, is this really a question of him struggling with his identity, or more just him using his manipulative tendencies and how charming and charismatic that he can be to get what he wants in that moment? And what I really love about this actor's performance is there are genuine moments in the film where you can feel for his character, and then you're slowly pulled back into the reality of, wow, he just really is a bad person. And I like the complexity of that. It really makes for an interesting watch. There's a scene early on with Agath's parents when they come to visit and they're talking to Tomas. The mother quickly accuses him of wanting to leave, or like wanting to go back to his home country and not necessarily being there for her. And it creates this really unique tension because she references the fact that he had been married to a man. And I think that that's really interesting, and I can only imagine how difficult that situation would be for someone who was in it, that was in a relationship with a man before, and that also is with women, and just how complicated that could be, and people being very judgmental of like, well, you're just going to go back and be with a man, you're not going to stay with my daughter, or whatever that might be. And I liked that complexity is introduced, but at the same time, we know who he is as a person. So is he really going to be able to overcome his shortcomings in order to be a better person and be there for her? And I loved that. I think both of the performances of the relative romantic partners, whether that be Adèle or Ben, both who give phenomenal performances in this, they all three were standout and impressive because they all three had to do very, very different things. And I really appreciated the level of all three of their performances. There's some really heated conversations in this movie that I think are accomplished brilliantly because of the talent involved in this film. I also really loved the way it was shot. I really liked the attention to detail in the production design. There's a lot of really unique costume choices in this as well. It's very visually and aesthetically pleasing, and I appreciated that a lot because it's a very small scale story. But I think because of the level of intentionality in the filmmaking, it really creates an experience that is easy to watch. As I said, this film is all about the chaos. It's very anxiety inducing, and I don't want to get too much into detail with every single plot point because it's really fun to just be on that adventure and kind of just get pushed and pulled with this lead character. And what I like about the movie is that most of the film's messaging is just like, we're gonna watch this awful person be awful towards other people, and then pack a couple of little things, as I discussed earlier, into the conversation as well, and how people are perceived in certain circumstances. And I liked that a lot. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm actually really looking forward to watching it again. And if you haven't had the opportunity to check this out, please watch it. It's really great. So have you seen Passages? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was fantastic. I really appreciated it a lot. I thought the performances were great. I thought it was really well shot, and I'm looking forward to watching it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.